All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to In Between the Lines, presented by Narika. My name is Sonia. I am Narika's Community Engagement Lead. Before we begin the show, I want to tell you a little bit about Narika and why we are hosting this community event. So Narika is an IRS-recognized nonprofit which serves those affected by domestic violence. Narika's programs include our domestic violence helpline, free counseling, support groups, and referrals for legal aid and shelter. We also provide clients with job training and wellness programs. Crisis calls to our helpline have tripled since the start of the pandemic, and we have increased our counseling staff, emergency financial assistance, and weekly food distribution to combat the severe rise in domestic violence we have seen recently. I encourage those of you who may need help or who may know someone who needs help to please contact us via email or our hotline. I'll include that information in the chat later. Otherwise, if you are in a position of safety, please consider donating on our website at narika.org to support our critical work. 100% of all donations and all of ticket sales for this event directly support survivors of domestic violence. So thank you for coming to the show, and thanks to our amazing Narika volunteers. We are here to listen to some of their amazing poetry and witness little magic in honor of those who cannot. However, with the proceeds from this event, we may be able to bring just a little bit of this magic to our survivors as well. So thank you for coming today. And without further ado, let me pass it over to our MC and director of In Between the Lines, Gonzalo Souza.
Hello all, my name is Gonzalo Souza and I am the director of this show, In Between the Lines. Before we get started, let's talk just about a few quick guidelines for today's show. We ask you that you keep your Zoom on speaker view, as we will use multiple spotlights throughout the show, and there's a button for that on the top right corner of your screen. We will have you participate throughout the show, but we will only be choosing participants from people that have their videos on, because talking to a disembodied voice isn't what this show is about. So please, if you're able, turn your camera on and participate along with us. This frame, square, rectangle is our theater for current times, so all theater etiquette does apply. Don't talk during a performance, but we want to hear your applause. We want to hear your reactions. So we also ask that you are unmuted for the show. But remember, if you talk, everyone will be able to hear you. So don't say anything embarrassing. And if you do have background noise, if there are kids, if there's a dog or a plane flying by, we leave it up to your discretion to mute yourself. And one last thing before we begin the show, I need someone to join me up here. And as that all of you have adhered to the camera off, I will once again throw out a reminder for cameras on. I'm going to bring Encore up. Is that okay, Encore? I'm going to bring you up. Hello.
Sure.
How are you?
I'm good.
I need a favor from you. Could you find something to write on and something to write with? A Post-it or a piece of scratch paper and a pen?
Yeah. Give me one moment.
Absolutely. Oh, one moment. Now I feel the pressure of keeping everybody entertained. So I will use the line that I feel the pressure of keeping everybody entertained. This filler for perfect. You're back. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you, the magic portion of today's show will be later on, but I want to start this right now. On that paper, I want you to write down a playing card. Now that's a value from ace through king and a suit, clubs, hearts, spades, or diamonds. Go ahead. And do not, of course, share this with anybody. Show it to the camera in the slightest. Do not share this with anybody. Now, at any point during today's show, if anything moves you, if anything strikes a chord, if it's a verse, a rhyme, a magic moment, I want you to scratch that playing card and change your mind. Write a new card in and write a new one down. You got all that, Encore?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your help. And enjoy the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, it is time to bring up our first performer. She's an Indian American writer who publishes her poetry to an audience of thousands on social media. She's a Berkeley student, double majoring in economics and biology, the president of Berkeley's Business Review, and a journalist interviewing people like Vyasar Ganesan from Netflix's Indian matchmaking. Give it up for Yashi Samrendra.
Yay.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today, and a huge thank you to Narika for hosting this event. I hope you're all having a good day. I've personally been having a very peaceful Saturday, which is nice because now we get to sit and make it even more peaceful and exchange some poetry. Or I guess it's not really an exchange, it's just my poetry, but still. I think that sharing poetry is a very intimate journey. And I think that before I can exchange some of these intimate moments from my life, or I can share these intimate moments from my life, I think that I should introduce myself. So something that I've done in the past and something that reminds me of my childhood is that when I was in elementary school, we did this activity called an I am poem. And basically what it was that it was a series of I am statements, and each statement ended with a little fact about yourself. And it was a way of introducing yourself to your classmates. So while that's not the main feature of all my poetry or my poetry collection, I think it's a good way to start off the show, and it's keeping in theme with the rest of the show. So here's mine. I am Yashi Samrendra. I am a student at UC Berkeley. I am an Indian immigrant, but most importantly, I am an artist. I love rainy days and paintings by Degas. I love political debates and hot chocolate in December. I love Frank Sinatra and Harry Potter on ABC. I despise realism and green beans. I dream of the New York skyline constantly. I wonder about human anatomy and the fashion industry. I am Yashi Samrendra, and I am made from love, art, and curiosity. So that's just a little bit of who I am. And in a different setting, if this was in person, I would love to hear more about you guys, but unfortunately we are on Zoom. So instead, let's get started with my poetry. So normally I don't share themes with people. I think I'm a very firm believer in the fact that great art should be interpreted by the audience. But that being said, I will share one little fact that you may have seen on the Eventbrite or just know, but the poetry that I'm sharing today comes from this collection I like to call Letters to My Younger Self. It's because when I look back on these poems now, I think that if I had the knowledge I had today for some of these moments, I would have been a lot more powerful. But I think that's what life is. Each of these moments, each of these poems was a lesson for me. So they're letters to my younger self. And so let's get started. For my first poem today, this is one that I wrote sometime during quarantine. This poem was written for a very serious event that happened in my life to my family. And the lines that you're going to hear aren't so much about what had actually happened as they are about the environment in my household during the moment and kind of describing what my family was dealing with at the time. So it was in this thought and in this state of mind that I wrote this first poem, which I've titled Calm During the Storm. Last night was one of those nights that seemed to last forever. Not the beautiful ones, no. The ones where 10 p.m. feels like the middle of the night, silence so deafening. Like a ghost town after the storm has torn through. Like watching a car float through the suburban streets the next morning, water up to its windows. The nights where your connection with God feels weaker than ever before, but the sounds of a hymn seem to keep you from falling apart. The ones with quiet desperation and thundering white noise. When you need something greater than science. The nights that end with your back against the wall and you keep blinking in the hopes that when you open them, you'll see the sun finally come up. So this poem was written for, as I said, an important moment or a tragic moment for my family. But what I like about this poem so much is that you don't need to have gone through what my family went through. You don't even need to know what my family had went through to understand what that environment is like, to understand one of those moments where you or your loved ones just don't know what comes next. One of those really intense moments where it's like the only people you can rely on are the people you have next to you. And I think that everyone has these moments in their life, just in different ways. And this was something that was important to me. Now for this next one, this is one that I know a lot of my college friends can relate to. I wrote this poem after I listened to a podcast, actually. So I was listening to the podcast, if anyone knows, NPR's Hidden Brain series. There's this episode titled Just Sex. And the host for the show is, his name is Shankar Vedantam. So it's this Indian guy. And he talks about the detrimental effects of college hookup culture. And it's kind of interesting because hearing an Indian host talk about the detrimental effects of college hookup culture kind of made me reminiscent of like some auntie or uncle lecturing me. But that's when I wrote this next poem that I call My Qualms with Hookup Culture. You know the number of moles on her back, but not the number of siblings she has. You've seen all of her bumps and bruises, but know none of the stories behind them. You know how to satisfy her, but not what makes her happy. You've spent so much time fighting intimacy, and you've done it with the most intimate thing there is. Is it worse to feel used or to feel unwanted? So this poem, I think, so if you listen to the podcast episode, it takes a much more technical approach, and it talks about the statistics and how college hookup culture is not beneficial for anyone involved. But for me, what I got out of it, the last line of my poem, is it worse to feel used or to feel unwanted? That is a direct quote from the podcast. And I liked that line so much because I know maybe some of our audience here tonight can't relate, but I know that there's this feeling amongst kids of our age where it's like, if you're not actively participating in these things, nobody wants you, nobody desires you. But if you are actively participating in these things, you're just being used by someone else. And that's not a great feeling either. And so that's what had inspired this second poem. Okay, guys, so for this last one tonight, this poem is one that's very close to me. So every poem that you've heard or will hear is something that has come from a truly personal experience. In fact, if I'm being honest, all of these poems are directly pages from my journal, and they're from really important moments in my life, as is this next one. And sharing my poetry initially was the most nerve-wracking experience when I started posting them on Instagram and on social media for people to see, because again, these pieces were written from low moments, and to share that with someone else is to be very vulnerable. But this next poem comes from, I was reflecting on a relationship in my life that at the time felt very inconsistent. And it was this lack of consistency, it was this lack of affection that was unfortunately influencing my perception of myself. And I think as a lesson, if the people here don't already know, but if anyone here ever doubts this, but you should never let anyone influence your perception of yourself. But at the time, this was something that I was doing. And I almost felt like I was craving love or feeling loved because I wasn't giving it to myself and I was relying on someone else to give it to me. And it was in this moment that I wrote this last poem called Cravings. I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel like this, of convincing myself that this is nothing but a temporary state of being. I'm tired of being disillusioned by myself only to have my supposed reality shatter in front of me time and time again. Days like this drain me. I feel detached from the rest of the world, distant from myself. It's like I'm watching myself from outside of my own body with sympathy for the girl in front of me. I watch as she drowns in her emotions, her head underwater, voices around her telling her to come up for air, but she cannot hear them. The sound is muffled that deep in the ocean. She's overwhelmed and she doesn't know how to come back up on her own. She never does come back, not on her own anyways. She floats underwater for days until something or someone lifts her and her spirits back to shore. Then she'll go days, sometimes months, forgetting she ever drowned in the first place. And she forgets until it happens again. The last time was March 2020, only for a couple of days. The time before that was November 2019 for a week underwater. The time before that was many days scattered throughout 2018 and 2019. So many days scattered here and there that some would say she was gone for almost half of the year. At least she was getting better at coming up quicker. She would have the energy to come back up on her own, except she starves herself, eating a large portion one day and skipping meals the next. Feeling guilty for being hungry. Isn't love inconsistent for everyone? She knows what a balanced meal looks like. After all, it's what her parents have given her her entire life. But that's not what she thinks she deserves. That's not what her palate craves. She's been halfway fed for as long as she can remember, and a whole meal seems extravagant, abnormal almost. When I came to Berkeley for the first time, I noticed her finally start to take care of herself. She was rid of all the toxic relationships, the innate jealousy of high school, and was finally surrounded by people that left her with no hunger to fill. It took her a while to trust, but when she did, she felt healthier and happier than ever before. The thing is, any lifestyle takes getting used to, and it takes months and years to get rid of cravings. So when the opportunity presented itself again, a taste of inconsistent love, she took it immediately. She told herself that the hurt was worth it because the good felt so good. For months on end, he gave her large portions the days he had enough to give. Text messages and FaceTime calls to leave her fulls for days. She would stay up at night with the aftertaste, reminiscing on how in these moments she felt perfect, almost whole. But then there were days when he didn't have enough to feed everyone. Days when he was full, so he didn't think to make sure she was too. Those nights, she would go to bed with her stomach grumbling, wondering what she had done to deserve this isolation, this loneliness. It took her over a year to realize that the starving wasn't normal, that love shouldn't be doled out in small portions. You shouldn't count calories or skip meals with love, and someone who chooses to love you won't only check up on you the nights that he is starving himself. She promised herself in those moments that she would learn to take care of herself. She would never rely on anyone else for the whole meal, farm to table, food so fresh experience that she deserved. But if she knows all of this, and I know all of this, then why are we both still drowning? So this last poem or prose piece is, I guess, is what you could call it. It came from, so my experience writing this is one of my favorite memories. I read another poem that shared a similar theme, and I loved this metaphor, this inconsistent love being compared to inconsistent eating habits, and leaving yourself hungry, feeling the same way as, like starving at night, feeling the same way as not feeling loved. And it was in that moment that I decided to write this poem and share this experience of mine. So that is all my poetry for today. Thank you so much again for all of you coming out to listen to this. And I'm really excited for you guys to see the rest of the show. So thank you.
Thank you.
Let's hear it for Yashi, everybody. Thank you. Really, thank you for sharing your poetry with us. It takes a special level of courage. So we are very thankful that you did share it all with us.